Forever. Dog.
Guys, God Friended Me is a new show on CBS. It starts at the end of September, but starting on August 31st, you can watch it at cbs.com. You can watch the pilot at cbs.com. You can watch it. I think they're also putting it on Facebook and YouTube and all over the place. We have the creators, Steve Lilien and Bryan Wynbrandt, here today, along with Alison Bennett, who is a terrific and very funny writer and human. She was on all of the seasons of You're the Worst. She's currently on Single Parents, which is coming out soon. Before all of that, we talk witches with Winnie Holtzman, whom you may know as the creator of My So-Called Life. She is also the writer of the book for the musical Wicked. And so we talk mostly about that. Winnie is terrific. We did a long interview with her some years ago that's worth looking up. It was a really fun panel. And we talked a lot about My So-Called Life, which I can't get enough of. And I also can't get enough of Winnie Holtzman. Enjoy this. We're talking to Winnie Holtzman on the phone. Winnie is an old pal. Thank you for returning to the show and chatting with us.
Of course, anytime.
We didn't get to talk when you were on the podcast a couple of years ago about your work on the musical Wicked, which you wrote the book for.
Yes, I did. I wrote the libretto, or the book, as we called it, not the novel that we adapted from Gregory Maguire.
So I'm curious to hear about, first of all, how you even got involved. Why you? Why were you the right person to tackle adapting this novel for a musical?
Well, I got involved in a very specific way. Stephen Schwartz, who, is an incredible American artist, who's written a lot of musicals, and they're all pretty wonderful. And he's an amazing songwriter. He actually, our paths had crossed when I was young and in grad school. I was studying musical theater writing at the place that I think is probably the only place in the world where you can actually get an MFA in musical theater writing. I may be wrong, but it's NYU Musical Theater Program, and it's part of Tisch School of the Arts. Anyway, I was there, and he walked in to speak to the students one day, and we had a little bit of an encounter. But the real truth of our connection is multifold. We also both at one point had one of his agent and mentor was Shirley the late beautiful woman Shirley Bernstein, who was Leonard Bernstein's sister, and she was Stephen's agent and close friend. And at one point, she was actually my agent. So what I'm trying to say is that I think Stephen was aware of me, and we didn't really know each other. But when he got he pushed Universal, who had the right. This is a long story, so forgive me, everyone.
No, it's so interesting.
Well, Universal, if you cut now from me in grad school to many years later, I'm out here in Hollywood, and Universal apparently had the rights to the novel Wicked, and had even begun a non-musical, completely non-musical film adaptation, which I guess it stalled. And it was at this moment in time that Stephen Schwartz read the book, and a friend of his gave him the book, and he had this epiphany that it should be a Broadway show, and that he very much wanted to write this show. And he pushed Mark Platt, who was then the head of Universal Studios, to abandon the idea for making it into a non-musical film and to allow him to attempt to turn it into a Broadway show. And that's when Universal agreed. Mark had actually performed in Pippin, I think it was, when he was in high school. He was a huge Stephen Schwartz fan. So
oh my gosh.
you could say like the stars aligned.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't like to say that out loud that much, but in this case, it really was very fated in a lot of ways. I think I had actually had a psychic realization, believe it or not, before it happened, that this was going to happen to me, because for reasons that I won't go into, but Stephen eventually called me and just said, I think I want to do this with you. We didn't really know each other well. We'd had one lunch. Someone at me who knew us both had put us together for a lunch, and we had hit it off. We're both, about a year into writing Wicked, we found out we were both from almost the same town on Long Island.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yes, this was fated to be. That's really funny.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah.
But I think, and I'm sure, as so many of us who work in this industry know, there is that sort of alchemy that it's a certain group of people coming together to make a particular project can really make it a special thing and feel like it is meant to happen.
Yeah, and that's not to say that, there were plenty of times while we were working on it that things seemed rocky, not between us, but just the writing of it. And there were times when it felt very far away. It's not like we went, oh, yeah, this is a piece of cake. But our connection, Stevens and mine, and then bringing Joe Mantello, just like the right person at the right time in his career, and the two young women, Dina and Kristen. Yeah. Again, just there was a feeling amongst us, like we all had this feeling that we all really, really wanted to do this together. And I think that's a good feeling to have when you're working on something. Yeah,
absolutely. No matter how huge of an endeavor it may seem. What was were you aware of the novel before starting these conversations?
Well, that was the psychic part, which is that I have a very, a memory that's very close to my heart, which is I live in LA, and I have for almost 30 years, but I was in New York City, as I am wont to do, and I wandered into a bookstore called Shakespeare and Company. I'm sure it's not there anymore, on the Upper West Side. It was one of those things where you fall into a bookstore daze, and you're just really caught up in, you're just wandering like a little ghost, those cubicles in the bookstore and those little byways.
Yep.
I looked up and I saw that book. This is in the 90s as this was happening, and the book had probably been published pretty recently, but not right away. I mean, in other words, it's probably been published for a while. I was staring at it, at the cover of the book, because the cover is very striking. It's this green woman who, is wearing that black hat. And you can't see much of her face. It's very evocative. And I turned it over, I flipped the book over, and I started to read the précis of what the book was about, and his incredible, just genius premise, which is that he's going to now tell the story of what happened in Oz from the Wicked Witch's point of view, and that actually we don't know the full story. Now that just gave me chills just now, just saying that in my kitchen. And I really, really, something in me just connected to that idea so big. It is a genius idea. And I bought the book, and I did something I never do, which is I really never do this. And I called my agent, my film agent, because I wasn't smart enough like Stephen Schwartz to realize it should be a music. I called my film agent and I said, has someone optioned this? And she said, oh, yeah, they're doing it at Universal. So I never read the book.
Oh, wow.
But what I did is I put it, she was like, oh, yeah, they've already got a writer on this. And so put it on my bookshelf in the little place where I work. And it stared at me, all the time. I would look up and stare at it. I felt this odd connection to the cover of that book. So when Stephen and I were put together for that lunch, we started talking about the book. I had never read it. So when he finally called me and said, you maybe want to read that book now, because I think I got the rights to do it as a Broadway musical, and I think I'd like to do it with you. I had a funny feeling like it, like that Blanche Dubois line. Stanley's line where he said we had this date from the beginning. Like, went back to that moment where I saw it in the bookstore on the Upper West Side, and I thought, I'm like, I was shocked, but I wasn't surprised.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so great. What do you think, other than the unbelievable concept? I mean, because it really is, it's a great hook, right?
Oh no, it was like we used to look at each other and go, wow, this is ours to fuck up. Because it was Gregory's, that notion, that concept is brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Did you have to find a way in that was particular to you? Did you have to sort of get witchy with it?
What?
Did you have to get witchy with it? Did you have to find your inner witch?
Without a question. I mean, I'm already almost there. I mean, I'm not a person. I've had my share of psychic experiences, and I do feel witchy a lot of the time.
I love it.
So it wasn't like the way I had to find my way into it is, I don't know if you've read the novel, but the novel is just not what we ended up, putting on stage. But we were inspired by the novel, and we stole from the novel. But we didn't. I think I knew from the beginning of reading the novel that it wasn't going to be like we just took the plot of the novel and we just musicalized that, because that's not what we did. Mm-hmm. And it had to do mainly with our personalities. I mean, Stephen and I saw a show. We were sort of seeing the same show, and it wasn't exactly the novel as it lays out, if you see what I mean. Mm-hmm. So we knew we were going to have to bring ourselves and figure. And it was really just a matter of, what did we want to, what were we drawn to? I mean, the biggest thing that became our linchpin, that became our guiding star, you could say, was Gregory's, another genius idea from Gregory Maguire that, he created in the novel that the two witches, Glinda, the Witch of the North, and the Wicked Witch of the West, had been college roommates. Now that is, there's just no other word for that but genius. Mm-hmm. And whenever Stephen and I just thought that was the most amazing idea, and that was really our lodestar in a lot of ways. Like, we knew we were going to use that, and in a funny way, we built the show around that, didn't we? I mean, their friendship. That's not the. Their friendship is not front and center in the novel. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, no, it's you've made it the driving. You and Stephen made it the driving force, which really is so. I mean, as much as the Maguire's novel humanizes these characters, I think you two took it even further.
Yeah, it's. I mean, if you're going to, we had the rights. We were blessed. We had the rights to adapt it, and so we knew we were going to adapt it because we were picturing a very. I think the ways in which we borrowed from him the most was, of course, his premise, his incredible premise, the brilliant idea of making them college roommates, and then the fact that the novel itself is so political and talks about power in very specific ways, and corruption, and that's a big part of our show.
Yeah, absolutely. That was, and that's an interesting thing, considering you and Stephen and your respective backgrounds, and in theater and TV and film, power is something that especially women often have to struggle with in this industry. Was that something you were able to work into the writing? Yeah,
I mean, I think one of the questions raised in the show is what is true power?
Mm-hmm.
So is it being popular? Is it being loved, looked up to, feared? Or is it something that comes from within? Is it standing in truth? I mean, what is power? And I think that's a very important question.
Yeah.
And it's in question for all of us, for men and women, but certainly women who've been, traditionally disempowered, throughout history, throughout time.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it's two young women who eventually take down a government.
Yeah.
That's really what Wicked is about. I realize that there are people that go there and don't see it that way. But what's interesting about our show is that now with this tragic change that's happened in our country,
mm-hmm.
power shift, we find that our show is
there's sort of a new relevance to it.
Correct, and we felt it was always thus,
mm-hmm.
but tragically, things have almost shifted so that it's become more noticeable.
Yeah.
When we were first writing the show, 9/11 happened, and we were led into what I believed was a false and trumped up, no pun intended, war, and a tragic war.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was always plenty to write about, but now things have actually taken a turn where, because our show is international. We have many productions playing around the world, and not just on Broadway. And people are responding to the show in more than ever.
Yeah.
If I could say that. So
no, I'm sure that's the case.
And it has to do with the story of two young women finding in different ways that are true to them, stepping into their own power,
mm-hmm.
which is the most important thing we can all do right now, honestly.
I think that's a great message, and yet another reason for folks to go and see the show if they haven't, or see it again, honestly, because it's reframed.
I didn't mean to make it into a commercial, but if you
it's true.
see it again, you may see it differently than you saw it, 10 years ago or so.
Yeah. We do need to wrap up. I feel like we could talk about this for hours and hours. It's absolutely fascinating to me. But let me ask you before we do, who are some of your favorite pop culture witches?
Bill Book and Candle.
Oh, good one. That's
do you know Bill Book and Candle?
Of course.
It's one of the best witches ever, ever, ever.
Did you see this as a kid?
I saw it as a kid. I thought it was the sexiest, most romantic movie I'd ever seen. I probably saw it when I was 11 or 12.
Mm-hmm.
But I watch it every so often, and it doesn't disappoint. That movie is awesome.
Yes, I agree. Folks should check that out if they haven't seen it. It's great performances. It looks good. It's well written.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's all about New York.
Yeah. It's such a glimpse of that time, too. It's really fun.
Yeah, exactly.
And what are you working on these days? Is there anything you can tell us about?
I'm working on the movie of Wicked.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I'm, there's kind of a surprise in my life, but I can't talk about it.
Okay. That's fair. We'll look for it in the future.
It's something I've been working on for years that
cool.
It's happening, so we'll see.
Oh, that's great. I assume it's a My So-Called Life reboot, right?
No, it's not.
I know you don't want to hear about it.
No, that's not. I'm not sure that's up my alley.
That's fair. Winnie, thank you so much for chatting. I hope to talk again soon.
Great to talk to you, Ben.
Take care. Now is the time for you to call up your local comic book shop and pre-order The Only Thing I Care About, my new Vertigo comic called Hexwives. It's about witches, and it's about gender politics. Does that sound fun? Probably not, but it is. The artist is amazing. The colorist is amazing. The editors are unbelievable. I'm just hanging on for dear life and hoping that people buy this so I can tell dozens and dozens of stories in this world. So please call up your local comic book shop. If you don't know where it is, go to comicshoplocator.com, put in your zip code, and order that comic Hexwives. It comes out on Halloween. You just tell them you want it. They'll hold a copy for you, and then you go to the store and buy it. It's easy. It's like $4. And I think you're going to like it. I do.
They write, they talk, and talk about what they write. Tune in tonight, or whenever the time is right. It's the Writers Panel with Ben Blacker, and it's starting now. Oh, yeah!
Welcome to all of you. What I'm going to do is have you go around and say your name on the microphone and tell us somewhere we might have seen your name on television. Alison, starting with you.
Alison Bennett, You're the Worst, LA to Vegas, coming up, Single Parents.
Bryan Wynbrandt, Alcatraz, Gotham, and soon to be God Friended Me.
Stephen Lilien, also Gotham and Alcatraz, and God Friended Me.
Let's get this out of the way because I also work with a writing partner and we are sick of telling the story. So I'm not going to ask you how you guys started writing together, but I am going to ask you how you do write together. What is your process?
There's a lot of screaming, a lot of yelling. No, I mean, our process usually we sit down and we break a story together, and usually we'll divide it up. You know, he'll take the front half or back half and vice versa. And then we'll write our first draft as quickly as possible because we all know that's garbage. And then we'll put it together, and then the real writing is the rewriting, and that's where we sit down really together and do the hard work.
You do, and let's get into it. What does that look like? Are you staring at the same computer screen? Do you put it up on a display?
I think when we start baking an idea, usually one of us will have an inspiration of an idea, and we'll call the other. We'll start to, depending on the show. Obviously, like with Gotham, for instance, our first episode of the show, we were brought in and they were doing the season with Benedict Samuel playing the Mad Hatter. And so they asked us to do this episode. And so we had a direction. So we were like talking about, what would be a great version of an episode? And so with that type of show, you're sort of given a guidance and the process will start from there. If it's just something we're coming up with, like God Friended Me, same kind of process, just a different direction where we kind of have free will to go and do whatever we want. So when you're on staff, sometimes it's sort of dictated in a way. But regardless of the entry point, we'll start kind of working off of a Google Drive together, and we'll be sharing that together at like the story document phase, where we'll kind of talk about conceptually what the episode is. And then when we get into an outline, which we usually write a very detailed outline that has scene work within it, so we know where our entry point within the scene is, we know what the scene is excavating for story, and we know what our out is. And then by then we'll share that. He'll be at home, I'll be at my place, we'll be writing together, we'll be on the phone talking. And then when we get to script, Final Draft has not yet mastered the collaborator.
They got to get on it.
They got to get on
it.
I don't understand
Come on, guys.
how it doesn't work, but usually what we'll do is Skype, we'll share the screen and one of us will take the comm and, the other one will be screaming at the other going, no, delete that one and put this there. And
But you don't do that in the same room?
Sometimes, we have families.
T-H-E-I-R. T-H-E-I-R.
No, it's not
surprising.
easy always to be, with Skype, you can see the other person. So it's still, you're still having like a conversation. Ideally, we would be doing it in the same room, but life doesn't always give you that opportunity.
And then how many drafts do you generally go through together until you turn it into someone?
That depends on the time frame. Usually at least one, obviously. We'd like to do more than one, but a lot of times with a network schedule, you don't have time to do more than one, and you just get it into, on Gotham, our showrunner, on 5-0, our showrunner. Now that we're the showrunners, we'll just read it and we'll be like, I hope it's good enough. And we send it into our partners and get feedback.
All right. That answers my question. As long as we're talking about process, Alison, left to your own devices, writing for yourself, whether it's an original pilot that you've sold or whatever, what does your work day look like?
I just had a baby a year ago, so it's changed a little bit. I used to have a more like luxurious process, but now it's real down and dirty. Left to my devices, I like to get to, I rent an office space.
Mhm.
I like to get there, get stupid email out of the way, nerd out on my whiteboards and stuff like that, and eat a lot of popcorn, get sad, get happy, and I just sit with my draft and go over it over and over and over again. So that's kind of the process. I basically just replicate a writer's room, but with myself, which sounds psychotic, but
No, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, do you
talk to the other writers?
No.
Like imaginary writers?
I mean,
in the
I
room?
wish there was someone else there sometimes, but when I'm left to my own devices,
But you'll do
it's not.
full outlines for
I'll
yourself.
do full
and all
outlines
that.
for myself. Yeah.
And then in the actual scripting, how long can you sit there and do it? Do you work in the morning? Do you work in the afternoon?
I mean, I've been on a show for most of the life of this child, so I'm trying to think about what I used to do versus now. But yeah, I can sit there for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
4 or 5 hours is if I can get 4 in, then I feel really
That's
good.
a lot.
But obviously, if I'm on a crazy deadline, I can really put my butt in the chair.
Right.
I think it was like 2 weekends ago. I had an episode due and a feature rewrite due over the weekend, and I wrote to the point that I got a blood blister on my hand. It's going away now for like the first time ever in my life, and I was like, "That's cool." I just did that.
It's impressive.
So yeah, so I can sit there for a while.
We are blue collar, us writers.
The same question for you guys. Like, I found the most valuable thing or one of the most valuable things in having a writing partner is you're held accountable for your time. Has that been the case with you guys? Do you generally, have the discipline to sit down and work left to your own devices?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing is it's a baton pass.
Mm-hmm.
So if you feel like I've got something going on, I have 2 kids, Brian has 2 dogs. A lot of times we'll be like, Brian will take a pass on something, send it to me, then I'll work on it. So it is really comfortable in the fact that like things are always going forward, even if one of us isn't sitting down and working.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You can get momentum. All right. That answers all my questions. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
Goodbye.
Let's talk about the beginnings for each of you. I don't like to talk too much about breaking in because I think everyone sort of has a different breaking in story and they're kind of not replicable. But what I am curious to hear about is the first piece of writing that you got paid for and how that happened.
Well, for us,
Was it as a partnership? First of all?
it was as a partnership. Well, we were toiling as assistants for many years. We met as assistants at Imagine Television during the Tony Krantz era when they did 24 and things like that. And there was a writing team in the office there who is pretty famous, Lowell Gans and Babalu Mandel. And we used to see them, coming and going as they pleased, and it just seemed like a great lifestyle. And so when we started working together, we were just kind of, we were trying all different types of writing. Like we tried a feature, we tried a comedy, and we got the attention of an executive at Kelsey Grammer's company. And they had this Nickelodeon half-hour pilot called Zen and Buster.
That's right. That's real.
That was about Kelsey Grammer's 2 Basenji dogs. And they asked us to do a take on what the life of these 2 dogs would be. Not like Kelsey Grammer wasn't a part of the show. It was like a family, like a well-to-do family in the Malibu Hills. And we sort of turned it into this, adventure, half-hour comedy, animation comedy. And we got paid I think $6,000 or $10,000 for it, and we thought we were rich.
Was it for the pilot or
it
was
was for the pilot?
pitch?
It was a rewrite.
It was a rewrite,
Okay.
and I remember specifically too because we had a raccoon, and his name was David Racuso, and he did the slow motion remove of the glasses, and he ate trash. It was a great character, but $6,000 back then. It was just we did it.
Yeah.
We did it.
Crazy. That
Successful.
feels amazing,
It's amazing.
right?
It's
Yeah.
the best thing ever.
So that was the first thing.
Did you guys have agents at the time? Did that help you
we have
to
agents?
God,
start
I don't even
on
remember.
your career?
I don't remember. I don't remember if we had agents at that time. I was around that time that we got our first agent, but definitely don't remember if we did.
But certainly the Kelsey Grammer animated dog show did not lead to agents.
No, it did not.
So
it did
was
not
it
lead,
through
it's not
writing?
even on our IMDb page. No.
Presumably they never made it.
No, they did not.
So was it through specs? Was it like, how did you get your agents?
Well, we were working on a feature at the time, and then Brian was an assistant for a movie director, and I was working on a TV show Boomtown, which Graham Yost did back on NBC, and he gave me my first break as a staff writer.
Oh wow!
And then that show, of course, I'm the staff writer. I made it, and then the show got canceled like 2 months later. But through that experience, I was like, I really feel like we should be doing TV together, not just features, and so we started writing in TV. But I'd gotten an agent on TV through Boomtown, and then they met with us on the feature side, and we got a feature agent together. And then once Boomtown went down, we decided to write full-time in TV. And so
it's hard to believe there was a time where like TV was the second option.
I know.
You know, it's like when we came out here, it was like writing in TV, you know, and then we wanted to be big feature writers, and that wasn't going well, and fail.
Yeah, and then we got our first show was Kyle XY on ABC Family about the kid with no belly button.
We wrote. But by the way, we wrote a spec. What was it? A spec?
Nip Tuck,
Shield, and the Shield.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, we got Kyle XY. So I don't know what that said about our Shield, but
Listen,
you know,
it meant you could write.
Yeah,
it meant people recognized that you could write. Okay, I want to pick up there when we come back. But Alison, what was your background? Were you a like UCB person?
I was like hardcore UCB in New York. And I think the first time I actually got paid for comedy writing, UCB was doing these corporate partnerships.
Sure.
And I think we were writing sketches for Skinny Cow ice cream. And that was like the first time that I was like, I just got paid for comedy.
I got paid to make jokes. That counts.
It was amazing. So that was the first.
But that certainly did not set you on your way.
No, I wasn't sitting on a Skinny Cow ice cream fortune or, reps, or I may have had a rep at that point, but.
Is that right?
Yeah, I had a manager who had seen me in a sketch show. It sounds like an All About Eve situation, but it was not. I was a writer on a sketch show, a sketch team, one of those mod teams, and one of the actresses fell ill, and I had to step in last minute, and this manager had kind of been coming to our shows because he repped one of the actresses, and he knew I was a writer, and he was like, oh, she can write and she can act, I guess I'll sign her. And then he's the one who introduced me to my agent, who I'm still with at UTA. And
so was the idea then that you wanted to write TV? Did you see yourself as a sketch writer? What was the goal?
I always wanted to write sitcoms. I always wanted to write half-hour comedy, but I had gone to school. Well, I'd gone to school for acting. And then I think by like junior year, I had realized that writing for television was a job. And I was like, oh, that's way better. That's what I want to be doing. I was sitting, punching up term papers. And, I was like, well, clearly I like this more. But then, I was still kind of doing some acting stuff in the beginning. But now I would probably rather die.
So when the idea turned to just writing, what were the early breaks? What was sort of the first stuff that you were churning out and sort of making your way in?
I guess getting on a house sketch team at UCB was pretty big, just in terms of being able to, turn out page count, learn how to get notes, and go through that entire process, produce a show every month. And then when I was kicking around New York, I started getting hired to do a lot of punch-up rooms and stuff like that on Viacom shows, and Meredith Vieira's daytime pilot. I did some joke writing for that. And,
Really?
I was just, doing the whole New York scene. And then I ended up working on this sketch show for MTV called Hey Girl that Julie Klausner ran, and had like the best staff of women. And we were sitting there writing these super feminist sketches. And I don't think half the episodes aired. Like, it was not a thing. But I moved to LA shortly after that.
And so that's the thing that sort of
that was my first
momentum
staff.
got behind you from all those things. I'm curious about, and I don't know if you guys have done this too, any of this punch up work, and I get asked about it a lot. I know the times I've been asked to do punch up is always just like, a guy who has a pilot.
Right.
Is that just how it works?
I think it's mostly through word of mouth, or like the the studios will put people together sometimes, I think. But yeah.
So that's what it was in
yeah,
New
you
York
put your
for you.
6 funniest friends. Or, these were companies that were just looking for young female voices at the time.
Oh, interesting.
I know in like features they have like they're starting to bring rooms together with writers. In drama, there's not really that punch up, mentality.
Sad punches.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
We left our punches on Zen and Buster. Stop there.
Exactly.
Listen, there's always one that got away.
No, I know.
Let's talk about Kyle XY. Was this a writer? They had a writer's room?
Yeah.
So this was your first real room experience. You had done Boomtown.
Correct.
And Graham knows how to run a room for sure, but you weren't there very long.
Yeah, well, I was a writer's assistant the first season.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Okay, so you had been there.
Yeah, and it was, Graham Yost is, not only is he an incredible writer, but he's just like salt of the earth. He's such a terrific person. So to work for him for a year and a half was like eye-opening. It was like going to college, really, on TV writing. But when we got into Kyle XY, it was a little cable show about a kid with no belly button. And so no one didn't really get much buzz at first. And then it took off. We were on it for 3 years. But the staff was absolutely incredible. Julie Plec, who created Vampire Diaries and the originals, Eric Tuchman, who just won an Emmy on Handmaid's Tale, Liz Tiglar, Chris Hollier, who's running Roswell right now.
Brian Holtzman, who did
Brian
7 seasons of...
So it's like we look back and see that staff. Frank Spotnitz helped out first season from X-Files, and we're like, I can't believe all these people were on Kyle XY. It's totally insane.
Well, it's probably why the show went 3 seasons.
Yeah,
it was
I know.
literally the drama about nothing. It was the Seinfeld of family dramas. Each episode was about nothing. You really
Is that right? I've never seen it.
No, it was literally like we had to reinvent the show every year because the first season... was about a kid who just sort of shows up without a belly button, and it's that standard kind of where did he come from? There's a mythology of someone following him. It had like a very genre element. And then the second season, we went a little bit away from that. We brought on Jamie Alexander that year, who's on Blind Spot, and she was the female version of Kyle. So she was Jessie XX. But it was really like a show that tonally had a lot of different places to go. So finding it was hard. And we kind of, each season, we're figuring out new ways to generate story from this really good high concept, but not a great story generator episodically. And so we leaned into the family drama and, we found our way through the show, but it was because of such a strong staff. And we're still close with everyone from that show.
That's great. So this was a strong staff with a lot of the writers had a lot of experience too.
Well, we were all young at the time,
right?
So Julie had never even written an episode of television.
An assistant, right?
She had been working with Wes Craven, and she had worked with
she was
Kevin Williamson.
She was actually at Bender Spink at the time, and she found the script.
As an executive,
and then she came on and then she started writing.
She met us. We met her at our interview, and that she was the one who hired us.
Yeah. That's crazy.
But Liz had just come off of one show. Bryan Holtzman had never. We were all baby writers
Chris
together.
Hollier was his first show. Eric Tuchman had done a lot of TV and but not in that space. He was on the early edition and Dr. Quinn. So he'd been around for a while, but again, just terrific writers, terrific people.
Yeah.
We lucked out on that experience because we still keep in touch with everyone. Especially, running a show now, it's like to be able to call Julie, who's been through it, and just be like, can we pick your brain and go to dinner? It's like, it's invaluable.
Absolutely. So the thing I'm curious about is, you have these writers who I guess didn't have a lot of experience, and who was the showrunner?
Eric was show running the show, and Julie was the number 2, and then they kind of co-show ran in the later years together.
So what I'm curious about is just how that room worked and what you guys learned from being in that room, where it sounds like everyone was sort of figuring things out as they went.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because every room has its own process and its own culture, and that room. It's so long ago. I'm totally honest. I don't remember exactly how we did it. I don't. I literally don't remember if we started with a theme or a story or it was just because it was serialized. We knew where we were going. But you go from a show like that. We created, Alcatraz. That was like a procedural, like a network procedural with a sci-fi mystery. And we had never been in a procedural room. And so that was like a totally different type of animal and how we broke stories there. And then you go to CSI New York and Hawaii Five-0, and it's just, you learn something from every show, both good and bad. And everyone's process is just so different. It's really hard to say, like which one's best. It's just you
Sure.
sort of experience it and move on, and you either survive through it or you don't.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess this is the thing I'm curious about. Now that you're running your own show, what have you taken from your past experiences that you're using to do this well?
I would say most importantly, be kind.
Mhm.
You know, treat people well. Everyone's trying to do their best. You know, showrunners have a tendency to want everyone to read their mind, and it's just an impossible task. And just taking the ownership on ourselves and knowing that, you know, we have to give our writers the best chance to succeed in doing their best work possible. And that's hard sometimes, but always that's like our true north, is just trying to be the most, you know, compassionate showrunners possible, while at the same time, you know, we're hardest on ourselves. So, you know, trying to find our own process, because even with all of those processes that we had gone through, I think right now we're still trying to figure out what process as showrunners works best for us.
Mm-hmm. All right. I want to pick that up in a minute. But Alison, it seems like once you sort of had a foothold and you sort of kicked around on some of these shows, the animated, The Awesomes, and Idiot Sitter, and a couple of these other credits, before sort of getting onto that sitcom track.
Well, that actually was on You're the Worst for those shows.
Oh, those concurrent?
Yeah, those were concurrent. So, because You're the Worst room was 5 months. And so then I would have breaks. And so I did an awesome season in between seasons of You're the Worst. And I did an Idiot Sitter season.
Oh, no kidding.
Between, I'd pick up tiny, tiny rooms in between a tiny room.
So these to me, and You're the Worst, everyone always wants me to talk about. But these to me seem like very different tones, very different kinds of comedy in them. So the thing I'm really curious about is, left to your own devices.
Yes.
Or not even that. Like on these shows, how are you getting your sense of humor through? How are you getting your sensibility through? Or is that not the job?
I mean, sometimes it's not the job. Sometimes you're, finding what's funny to your boss or the story or the characters. But I would say that You're the Worst is probably the closest to my own sense of humor. And that was like one of the reasons that it was so fun to work on that show for 4 years. Yeah. But I tend to be a little raunchier and edgier. I don't know what that means, but
very edgy
I'm so edgy, you guys. I just cut bangs. It's the whole thing. But yeah.
So tell me about how You're the Worst was run.
Okay.
Please.
So that room was the same 5 writing entities. So there was a set of partners, but there were basically 5 people, 6 people. For the first 4 seasons, it was the same group. And we, and
I didn't realize that.
and we became a family. On the show, when we talk about family, we always go family after that with the character of Lindsay. But we got super tight, and that was a really well-run room. I mean, the great thing about cable in some instances is that you're writing it and then you're shooting it. Mm-hmm. So there is a little bit of luxury to like sit there with ideas. I know.
I would give
that
for
is
that.
the good life.
Now that I'm in network, I'm like, I had no idea what we had. So we would spend at the top of the season a couple of weeks, talking about theme for the season, where we were going with the characters. The first season, we spent a lot of time talking about side characters. And I think that's really important, because some of the stuff that we talked about in those initial conversations about like Paul and Vernon, characters that really only had a handful of lines in the first season. By season 4, we had entire episodes where they were the only characters, and we had tons of information on them because we had spent that time. And, I think a lot of story comes out of those initial conversations. It makes it so much easier. So I do think sometimes people are like, oh, it's a little like playwrighty to like sit around and be like, let's talk about this person for a while. But I think it makes coming up with story so much easier later down the line. And Stephen, our showrunner, Stephen Falk, he definitely knew that. And then that room was about young people in their 20s and 30s. in Los Angeles, and that's who the staff was. So every morning we would sit there and we'd go around and we'd say what we did the night before. And if it was, every morning. And if it wasn't good, Stephen would harass us and be like, that's boring. Like, we can't do anything with that. And it was that we spent a lot of time, like I said, the first few weeks, and then we were off to, Breaking Story, pretty much like all shows I've ever been on. And
did it feel in the beginning, and I vaguely remember talking to Stephen about this at the time, that he didn't have a good sense of what episode to episode it would be, and that's where he was really leaning on the writers? Did it feel like that as a writer?
No, I never. Stephen always knew what the show was, as far as we were concerned as the writers. If he didn't, he was doing an amazing job.
Well, I think he had a vision for the show, but filling those 25 minutes every week.
Well, the first season, we knew we wanted to subvert all of the traditional rom-com tropes. Right. So we really had a map for the first, because it's like, the first time you're not just fucking and you're going out on a date or, meeting the parents and, we kind of hit all of those. And so that was a great map for the first season. And then the second season, it was like, well, what are we going to do? They're now living together, but we just didn't want to do a story about, you're leaving stuff around and it's your towels on the floor. That just wasn't what we were interested in. And then that's when Stephen introduced the idea of doing the clinical depression episode, arc. Yeah.
Hey, if you follow me on Instagram, which you should, I'm at B.A. Blacker, you know that I do a lot of cooking and a lot of taking pictures of my food. But even I, a wonderful cook, I wouldn't say chef, I'm a home cook. Let's not get carried away. Even I, a wonderful cook, do not have time every day to shop for ingredients and then come home and make a meal of making a meal. So what do? I get Hellofresh. It's a meal delivery kit service that shops, plans, delivers step-by-step recipes and pre-measured ingredients so I can just cook it, eat it, and enjoy it. Seriously, Hellofresh is like the next best thing to making a meal up myself. Because the food is all really fresh, it's all really good, the instructions are easy, and they're really quick to make. It's like the best thing for a weekday meal. There's something for everyone with HelloFresh's selection. 3 plans to choose from: classic, veggie, family. I say get all 3. The veggie ones are actually really good. You can tell that I mean that because it sounded like I went off script, and I actually did go off script. The veggie ones are really good. Each week, there's a 20-minute meal on the classic menu for when you really don't have more time than that. And who has more time than that? I don't. You can rediscover the excitement of cooking or discover it for the first time. I recommend HelloFresh to people who don't usually cook for themselves. You can feel confident when cooking HelloFresh with the simple recipes outlined on pictured step-by-step instruction cards. So even if you don't cook, it's very easy to do. Enjoy not having to plan dinner, spending money on takeout for an easy night, or worry about gathering ingredients week after week. You have enough going on in your life. HelloFresh believes cooking should be simple and convenient, not a chore. Now, I don't find cooking a chore, so I reject that assumption, but I know that many people do, and no joke, like, look, I'm making light of it. This is an advertisement, but I really do like HelloFresh. And I'm really flattered that they would advertise on this podcast because I use their stuff. I'm a regular subscriber. Anyway, simple and convenient. All the ingredients come pre-measured, which no joke is the best thing. Like if I could pay someone to do a mise en place, I would do it. This is even better because I don't have to have someone in my home. It just comes in a box. All the recipes take about 30 minutes, which is like the minimum amount of time for a really great meal. Lots of one-pot recipes, which I'm a big fan of, so speedy cooking, minimal cleanup. There are many benefits of subscribing, so you can keep enjoying HelloFresh week after week. Spend less time meal planning, spend less time grocery shopping, and get that time back to do more of what you love, like watching TV, which is how I am using the time given back to me by HelloFresh. I can watch more baseball. All right, this is a special offer. A unique promo code for a total of $60 off. That's $20 off your first 3 boxes. Visit HelloFresh.com/panel60 PANEL, and the number 6 and the number 0, and use the promo code PANEL60. It's like receiving 6 meals for free, up to 50% off 3 boxes. So visit hellofresh.com/panel60 and use the promo code PANEL60. PANEL 60.
I'm so jealous when you talk about time. It's like the most valuable
I know.
commodity in television because I totally get it. Especially like in cable, we have friends who are like, they have been working for 3 months, we're not shooting for another 2 months. And like our show got picked up and you have 6 weeks before you go into prep.
Yeah.
On episode
We got picked
1.
up on the 13th. We had a room May 13th. We had a room on May 23rd.
Yeah.
And we were
prepping
filming our first episode July 6th.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
It's
like
crazy.
that first week, you're like, this is great. We're talking big
Let's
global
blue sky.
character and blue
Let's blue sky
sky. And then
character
it's
for
just
3
like,
hours.
We have an
it's
outline.
ticking.
We have network notes down.
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
Then and then they're like, where's that story doc for episode 2?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, yeah, we got to
it's
do
great.
that.
But despite having like all of the luxury of having time, that was the most efficient room
Really?
I've ever been in, to the point that people have been like, you're the worst maid to a soldier. Like it was very like 9 to 5. There was no YouTube hole. Like
Right.
we worked in that room.
Totally.
And
To
'cause
what do you attribute that?
I think part of it was that Steven wanted us to like go out at night and like get thrown
Generate
up on
story.
in a karaoke bar and like generate story. And I also just think nobody's that funny at 9 o'clock at night. You're just punchy.
Well, it's the
And
same.
you-
Yeah. I mean, a writer's room has a very firm expiration date.
Yeah.
And it's like 4 to 6 hours in there. I mean, to me, I feel like the room it can make you feel like a story's working when it's not.
Right.
So the sooner you like get something up on the board and you feel like basic shapes are there, I feel like have a writer go off and write a story area based on that. 2 or 3 pages of like a basic shape. I don't have to know every single turn and twist, but like we can assess if that story is going to work for us better on the page than on the board. Because everyone on the board is like, ooh, it's this, it's that, and it feels really great. But
It's written in
90%
colors. It looks so pretty. It's so
you're
great.
weaving in characters, but then you get into it, and it's like, this doesn't work as a scene. This story has to be moved all the way up because it takes you 2 acts to get to the actual meat of what the story is.
Right.
And the board doesn't really give you that feedback, at least with us, in a way that feels like spending hours after hours in the room is worth
Be
it.
wrong fast.
Although I will say on You're the Worst, we did everything together up through the outline. And then
Yeah.
we did the outlines together. They were
That's-
up there.
that's pretty
Because there is
amazing.
something about, well, there were 5 of us and by the 6 of us. And by the end of it, I'm not, Steven's, other than Steven. But like by the end of it, we always would joke that we were kind of like one brain and we still hang out all the time. And it's like, oh, I'm back in my brain. But there is something comedy-wise about being
totally.
there and like improvising dialogue
Absolutely.
and whatever and getting it up there.
Do you have
And
it up on the screen? Like comedy rooms, I know a lot of
there,
times
it varies from room to room. I'm on a real whiteboard heavy room right now, and I love it. You're the Worst, we were whiteboard, and then once we had rough beats, we would kind of start putting the notes into where those beats were and refining it and refining it and refining it. And then by the time we were done, the outline was done. So no one was going off to write the outline.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes Stephen would be like, go work on beat 4 and come back. But yeah, it was more of a group process.
And
but
you had-
every
and
show
you had-
does
and-
it so
and-
differently.
And you had a clear map when you were going off to write your script. You weren't questioning. You weren't in a scene going, "What the fuck is this scene?" We really didn't talk about this scene, you know. And that's a hard thing to send off a writer, where it's like the one line is Jim Gordon tells Bullock not to do this X, and then you're like, "Well, I'll figure out what that is later."
Well,
you know?
Yeah.
well, let's get into that because I'm sure you've all, experienced this sort of thing where you're sent off on an outline or on a script and you don't have all the information or you're not sure how to execute. What do you do?
Silence.
Freak out.
Silence has filled the room.
I sometimes like it. It depends on how.
I agree, actually.
To have a little freedom sometimes, like pockets of it throughout the script. There's something coming up in my single parents episode that I didn't talk about in the room. It was just like a minor like pop. Like I would never obviously come back to a showrunner and be like, here's a whole new thing. But it was just a late night idea. And it's one of the things I'm most excited to shoot. I mean, like 99% of it is stuff that we all came up with together in the room. And I love all of that. But to have a little bit of freedom is fun sometimes.
For sure.
Yeah,
I think
you never know until you get on the page where it's going to go. So it's true. It's like sometimes being overly precise when you're coming off an outline that's so detailed can hamper you because it's like, I want to take it a different way, but it's so specific.
Right.
But I think that's just experience. After a long time, it becomes easier to like make something out of nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, our first year that we were writing on Hawaii Five-0, we would have very detailed outlines on that show. And it was a room heavy show. And like for us, there's some people who, and I admire it, who are on the board and it looks like an outline on the board. Like it's like, open on so-and-so. For me and Steven, usually our thing is like, they learn this and that's the beat. So like I wouldn't say our strength is board work. Our strength is more on the page and finding it once we're in the soup of the page and making it into something. But on that show, you had a showrunner who was like was very specific, very precise about what he wanted, and you would get approval on your very specific, very precise outline. Sure. And the first episode we turned in, which he really liked, he was disappointed about certain aspects of the fact that we either, if we did step out and change something, it was always like, why did you change that? And then we'd explain why. And then if something wasn't working, why didn't you change that? So you were sort of like in a weird, catch-22. Yeah. And I think after that, we realized like if we instinctually feel like something isn't working, we have to change it because at the end of the day, you're going to have to defend what's on the page to your showrunner. And if it's not working, and we would instinctually be like, wait, this beat's not quite right, but it was in the outline. It's what we discussed. We're just going to show it. And you get those showrunners who, when they see it, they want you to make those changes. And I think that's what we've told our writers is like, if you get on the outline and you're writing your script and you get into a scene and you're like, this isn't right, come to us and tell us. And we just had that with one of our writers, and she had an instinct to remove a character from a storyline. And as soon as she said it, we were like, you're 100% right. Great idea. Remove that. Carry on. So I think you have to be open and fluid because the story wants to do what the story wants to do at some point. Right.
And as a writer, especially if you're me and you're like a homework person and you want like the A and the star and like the good grade and stuff.
I think we all are that.
Like going off the outline is terrifying. So it's great that as showrunners, you guys have that open door.
But that isn't always everyone's experience.
Yeah, no, it's not. I think it's because
can be a risky move.
Absolutely. It's because we've come from either really great experiences like with Eric and Julie where they, they allowed you to do that, or just you get more comfortable with the choices you're making. But I think just we have been through so many staffs and so many showrunners. We don't know what our process was going into it. We still don't 100% know what it looks like, but we knew the type of showrunners we wanted to be.
Yeah, and I think you're always in situations, and this is one of the things I will say that like is a good lesson that we've learned is like a lot of times you've turned in something when you're on staff and a showrunner takes their pass and they rewrite you, and then they never talk about it, So it's like, oh, why did they make that change? I thought that was working. Versus we've had showrunners be like, let me walk you through what I did and why I did it. I mean, that was a good version that we put on the page, but here's why we had to go this way and like talk to us about it. So now we're in that position. And if we're rewriting people, we'll bring them and be like, that was really good. We got to this point. We felt like we need to do this, but let me talk you through it. So next time, this is what we're thinking and explain it to them.
That's great.
I think that's a tool that like is really helpful
for
a writer is show me and help me and put them in a position to succeed versus just like, thanks, I'll take it and not going to talk to you about it.
Right.
And as much as I think new writers are told to not be precious and to leave their ego at the door and know that they're going to be rewritten, it's a hard thing to understand so that you guys can give them this experience.
Absolutely.
The one you either wanted or got.
Yeah.
And you treat them as you wanted to be treated.
You see so many lower level writers, over the years who just get destroyed essentially. And because they're not being nurtured, they're not being like given a sec. It's like you get one shot and you're a staff writer and it's like you're looked at a certain way versus it's like there's a talent there and it needs to come out and they need a second chance. It's impossible to
there's no minor league system. So
no, and certain shows I always used to say like certain shows are not teaching hospitals.
Sure.
And it's hard to find shows that are teaching hospitals because you're in some scripts coming in with bullet holes in it, and you gotta figure out a way to keep that script alive, and you don't have time to tell the writer this is what's going on. Right. And look, we had to make a choice based off of production with one of our episodes where we had to say, look, to the writer, we know we had you slotted here, but we need to take that slot. You will get your slot, but it's nothing you've done. It's just like, we are the fastest way to get it to the studio. I don't have to note myself. I'm gonna have to go through you. I'm gonna have to take a pass just because that's what our job is to do. So that was a tough thing. And I felt bad to have to do it. But at the same time, it's like, this is, at the end of the day, it comes down to us. And so it is that fine line of, wanting to be nurturing and also understanding that at times you have to make those tough decisions.
Of course. I also like being on shows, and I'm Single Parents does this, You're the Worst did this. When you bring your writer's draft in and you kind of do like the page by page notes, you do it in a group. Yeah. Mm-hmm, so that way I'm learning from the writer before me. Oh, well, that's not quite the voice of the show, especially on a first season show when you're trying to figure out comedically like what the vibe is. Yeah. So that's always helpful too.
Yeah, CSI New York, we did that. Like we were on the last season of that show, and it was the first show where you didn't have to do outlines there, but your boards had to be super duper precise, which is tough for us because we're not super board people. So we brought in the script, and I remember we were pitching our first episode, and I was so anxious because I'm the same way at Gold Star. Everything has to be A plus or I'm like the worst human being ever. And we got into an argument in the room because it's the only time really it's ever happened because I'm like, what? Stick to the script, stick to the page. And I saw Pam Vise, who was the showrunner, being like, oh boy. And the script turned out great and everything, but that was a version of an episode of a show. Like you would go off, you would write your script, and then you'd come back and you would get notes in the room, which is a terrifying process the first time you do that. You're like waiting and you're just like, and it was, thankfully, the script went over well, but we saw other writers before us. Like one episode, the showrunner was just like, okay, we need to, like, they came in the room and there was no, like, here's overalls in the script. They were just like, we have to reboard this. And it was like, you could see the writer just want to die. And you see that and you're like, oh shit. But I do hear what you're saying. It is an interesting process because we did it on Gotham also. Yeah. The tricky part with doing it is it takes so much time. Like, and
in comedy, you got 28 pages to go. It's fine.
You got 50 pages.
Here's 28. There's some jokes. We'll redo those jokes.
It's crazy when you have to like make sense of a psychopath each week. Like in
is
like
it the showrunner or the character?
Both. No, like on Gotham, it's like you're trying to like find the pathos for why, the Penguin is doing something each week, but it has to match the plot and it has to match what the bad guy's plot is. And just trying to like find those like story mechanics are so hard.
Gotham also had like 18 characters that you're writing for. You're balancing so many different storylines. Versus you go on a show and it has like 5 characters and you're like, this is incredible, 5 characters.
I think Single Parents might have like 12 or 13. The show that I'm working on, because there's the single parents and then there's the kids.
Yeah, it's tough.
So there's 5 kids.
A lot to juggle.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear about going from this You're the Worst room where you all loved each other to rooms where these network rooms, which tend to be a little bigger, they tend to have much more experienced or seasoned writers. And also it seems like there's a lot more money and a lot more pressure on the showrunners.
For sure.
Where it feels like Steven was sort of, after a certain point, let alone to make his show.
Oh, yeah, after a certain point. And that's just, FX's philosophy. Yeah. And, also Steven having a real handle on what we were doing.
Absolutely. So tell me about this transition for you and what you could take from that You're the Worst room and what you sort of had to learn that was new.
Right. Well, I hate to be like, mommy, because I've already mentioned my baby twice, but I was like 900 months pregnant the first time I ever walked into a network room, which was the LA to Vegas room. And I lucked out so much because those people were like the nicest group of people ever. And the Single Parents room, super nice again. So it's really funny. There's these 2 writers on You're the Worst, Franklin and Shane, who would just be like, you're going to go to network and you're going to get eaten alive. Like there's going to be some co-EP who's just going to make you cry every day. Like, because I'm sensitive. But But it never.
But also, you're coming from
happened.
this place where it was 5 of you for 4 seasons.
Yeah, I became my best friend in the world as the other female writer on You're the Worst, and we would sit cat a corner from each other like this, and I would just stare into her eyes like all day. And there'd be times where I'd be like, I'm feeling uncomfortable. And then I'd be like, oh, it's because I'm not with Eva. It was like almost having a writing partnership without actually having one. We wrote, I think maybe 2 or 3 episodes together over the course of the series. But but then there's also like this week I've had all of my production meetings for my episodes, and the amount of budget is so different. And people rushing over being like, hey, like, can you sign off on this crazy thing that we've come up with based on a throwaway joke that, you thought of at 1:00 in the morning? You're like, yeah, cool. Like, it's amazing. It blows my mind. I think I looked like a complete psycho because I was just beaming in the production meeting, like so thrilled still to just, have all this fun stuff coming up. Yeah, I love it. And, there are clearly more notes. Like that's like part of the game.
Yeah.
But even my first few months, people are like, you're sick. I was like, these are network notes. Like, I've worked in cable and streaming for so long, and now we have a thing to fix, and it's like a puzzle, and everyone's like, you just kill yourself.
That's the hardest for writers to adjust. Really, at coming from cable, from network, or just any level, is like being able to handle notes, especially if you have a pod attached, if you have producers attached, you have a studio
so many people
not tied to the network. So we're right now, our show is Warner Brothers. So we're at CBS with Warner Brothers, and we have Greg Berlanti. So you're really going 3 steps along the way. And a lot of times not everyone agrees on everything.
They disagree a lot, which is crazy.
It is trying to, that's like a real skill.
Was Bad Robot, Warner Brothers, and Fox. And we never found a version of the show that everyone agreed on. The good thing about God Friended Me is, thankfully, to this point, everyone agrees on what the show is. And I couldn't say better things about Greg Berlanti and his team of producers. Great. They're the tops. They just get television. They give you the freedom to be the producers you want to be on your show. And getting a chance to do a second show with Warner Brothers, we love them. And CBS has been great.
Yeah,
actually.
coming off of
CBS
Gotham
has been phenomenal.
Yeah, we've had that experience.
Because there is that sort of cliche that networks just inundate you with notes, but I think our experience thus far with CBS on God Friended Me is they're giving us the notes that they should be giving us. Nothing that feels superfluous or unnecessary. Right. They're being very calculating and smart, and look, again, it's that people pleaser thing. You want to make your partners happy. You want everyone to like the show, and it's hard to sort of go into a notes session and not be like so excited and then have your heart broken when they don't love one little tiny thing. But I think over the years in writing and network, you do get a little bit of a thick skin, and you have to, and that transition can be difficult.
Yeah. It's been fun. I mean, I don't love getting notes, but it's, so far it's kind of.
Well, and it's also, like you say, you do this for long enough.
Right.
Yeah. You become used to it, and you know how to deal with it, and you know how to have the conversation rather than getting defensive.
The biggest jump for me has been what you can put on.
Really?
Like ABC is, it's a Disney corporation versus FX.
But it's also Liz Merriweather.
Yeah, of course. It's gonna be an edgier show. But there are days where like my brain is still like in You're the Worst, like a little shadow of it. And I'll be like, there's kids on this show. We can't do this. It's crazy.
Are you getting that outlet elsewhere?
Yeah.
We're working on other things?
Yeah, some other stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
That you can't talk about?
No, I can talk about it. I'm working on a feature right now that's got some stuff in it, and I'm developing, hopefully. Right now, we haven't taken it out yet, but I'm in the pitch part.
That's good. This is the thing I kind of want to talk about with both of you. That you got everyone on board or on the same page for God Friended Me had to be part of the pitch of it, right? You must have been very clear in what this show was. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, we've all taken pitches out that are just, you don't sell. They're not right. You think they're great. This is one of those pitches that came together. We felt like we had a clear view on the characters, on the plot, on the mythology, and also a lot of times you joke of like, what, and they want to know what's personal. Why is it like exciting for you? And most of the time you just make that shit up. And we led with, when we pitched it this time around, we led with, look, our show deals with religion and different points of view on it. And like in our pitch, and we explained like how the tone of the show we wanted by, we literally started the pitch where Bryan was like,
I said, you know, you could define how I feel about God in 3 words, which is Michael fucking Jordan. And I talked about being a young Clevelander and seeing him beat the Cavs on the, you know, on a 1-second shot where I was praying on the timeout. I said, if there's a God, make sure my Cavs don't lose. And I would say, you know, clearly in that moment, I realized there is no God, or at least he doesn't like people from Cleveland. And then I threw the floor to Steven.
And I was like, at the exact same time, I'm a Mets fan growing up in New Jersey. It's like 86, Mets are in the series against the Sox, ground ball to Buckner. And I'm like, please, God, make this guy miss it, goes through his legs. And I'm like, there's a God. There's definitely a God. So like,
so
right
he's
away,
the believer, I'm the non-believer. And we've talked about it our whole lives about that. And we just sort of use that as a way in to say both, like, that's the tone of the show, like the tongue-in-cheek kind of quality of the show that we're going for, but also that it's rooted in, you know, what makes us all human and those experiences that do shape your point of view on faith and religion, whether you believe in it or don't. And here we are, 2 guys who have different points of view, but it's never affected our relationship. So it was a good way of just getting them to, like, I really believe connecting with the people you're pitching to on a personal level very early on in the pitch is key. They hear so many pitches all day.
I swear, it's like sometimes you go into the room and it's like, it's just a conference table. It's a boardroom. And they're sitting on their side and you're on this side. It's home and away team. And you're like, fuck, you know. And then you get into some rooms and it's more of like a living room and it's casual and you feel comfortable and you're much looser and it's not as corporate.
It has weirdly beachy decor.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
some nice mints and it's like, but I mean, that affects how you pitch too, your comfort in that. You know?
I would say
100%.
like, it definitely helps especially in our, to have like, you know, a nice pitchable high concept. I mean, with Alcatraz, it was the same thing. When we pitched that, we pitched it to JJ and he was like, that's the best idea I've ever heard. That was like one of the best days of our lives. And as soon as he said that, we knew we had a show. Yeah. You know, when we pitched this show, we started taking it out to the networks. We sold it in the room at NBC and we were like, okay, we're onto something. And then we did the same thing at CBS and ultimately at CW. And we had a choice and it was like an amazing, it was like you know, you don't get that experience. And
what was that one-line hook or however long it was?
For God Friended Me? I think it was that notion, but it was the idea of like, you know, a story about an atheist who's friended by God on Facebook and sent friend suggestions each week of people he's supposed to help. Meanwhile, in his personal life, his dad is a reverend. So he has this huge divide with his father. And I think it didn't sound log-liney. I mean, Alcatraz was in 1963. It closed. Oops, no, it didn't. People disappeared. So it just depends on each pitch. But I think, you know, they're really looking for a concept that they can hook into and a character that matches the concept correctly. Yeah.
And it sounds like, again, you just in the setup for it, you were able to get across tone as well as
it's so important when you're doing a show like that because like it's sort of everything. It's like if they're laughing and they understand like, you know, the tone versus, you know, just like, all right, what's the concept? What's it look like? What's it feel like 10, 20 episodes in? You know, so it's important for them not only tone, but also if they actually see that there's a show there. It's not just a great pilot, but like, what's the series? Because ultimately, the pilot episode is not a true representation of what the series is going to look like. We talk about it all the time. God Friended Me, the pilot, is so premisey. Our main character doesn't even realize what's happening until the end of the pilot. So the second episode picks up. He has a greater understanding that, like, you're in a television show and here's the premise and you're getting these friend suggestions. So it's like episode 2 is a better representation of what the series is going to be versus the pilot.
Yeah. Did you pitch out the pilot in the pitch?
Yeah.
We did.
And then sort of talked your way through the season?
Yeah. We like pitched out the big turns of our pilot, which, you know, was this, you know, him being friended, this guy on the street who he stops from committing suicide. And then him getting a second friend suggestion of who ends up becoming one of our main characters, Violet Bean's character, Kara, and then circling it around to where that guy who he saved actually plays a key part in helping her. So it was about the connections, and it sounds silly in just that description, but I hope and I believe it's better than that on the screen. But it did sort of give them a sense of the show. But it's hard. I mean, you're coming up with a whole episode you know, and you don't know. I mean, you just don't know. I mean, it's all
For sure.
theoretical.
Alison, this show that you're getting ready to pitch, or that you are pitching, tell me a little bit, please, about like the work that goes in. This is something we don't often talk about. Like we'll talk about the actual pitching, but I think we don't talk enough about this is a full-time job on top of your job.
On top of a job.
Put this thing together.
Yeah, on top of a job. So, I mean, I'm on a deal at 20th. So part of my job is to bring ideas to them and they kind of see what they're interested in. And so there's that process of just pitching shows to them. And then we've narrowed it down to a favorite. And so right now I'm going on dates, I've been calling it. I'm like pilot dating or development dating, where I go on dates with people and see if maybe they're going to be a fun creative fit in terms of like a producer or a director, sometimes another writer. And then
What's
at this
20th?
point, Fox.
No, I know. What's 20th?
What do you mean? Oh, like I have no idea.
Like,
We'll
what
find
is that
out.
now? Yeah.
We'll find out.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll find out. It's going to be a wild year again.
To backtrack a little bit. So
Yeah.
being under the deal, you have to bring ideas, like development is part of it.
Yeah.
Those are more casual pitches. Those are just sort of saying, here are three things I think.
Like pretty, they're, at this point, we're all familiar with each other.
Right.
It's the second year of my deal. So I can be like, what about this? What about this? What about that? It's like a lunch,
Right. Until
they're like, this is it. And this year we kind of like went around on a couple ideas. And then once everyone's super excited, it's the one.
So coming out of this is one of the ideas.
Right.
And then before you sort of either start dating pods or
I'm dating.
actual pitch, how much work are you putting in? Are you fleshing out the idea? Are you waiting for the development process for that?
It's hopefully whoever I'm bringing on is going to have thoughts.
Yeah.
So I'm not like to the letter.
They're gonna have points.
Yeah, they're going to have points. I'm going to make those people work. No, but so I have if I was doing it in a vacuum, what I believe the pitch of the show would be. And then once we're finalized on my development husband or wife, I'd love it to be a wife. Then we could, then I'll get their thoughts and we'll take it out.
What's funny is I don't know with comedy, but this is Godfriend was the first time we actually went out with a pitch with a director attached.
Oh, really?
And I don't know how that's been with you, but like it was like super. Marco Siega, who's been our creative partner since day one, we pitched him the show before we even went to Berlanti and to Warner Brothers. Julie Pleck had been telling us for years, you guys have to sit down with Marco Siega. You would love him. And finally we sat down with him.
Yeah, our agent at CA was like, he wants to meet with people for development season. So they set a meeting and we started pitching him Godfriend to me. And he's like, I grew up as an atheist. And like it was like sort of love at first sight between the three of us. We had just such a great alchemy, and it has stayed that way. He stayed on as a producing director of the show. Yeah. He did the pilot. He did the second episode.
In the pitches, he brought a visual lookbook. So as we were talking about things, it was his representation of here's how I see it, here's what it's going to look like. And it was really helpful to like sell the world and how he wanted to capture it, because it really added a different dimension versus just talk. They could actually look. And when we talk about a character and you see pictures, or you talk about a look or New York City and how he wants to shoot it, I think that really helped sell the series. It was an advantage. I mean, it was the first time really walked in with a creative partner as a director.
And these days, you're wading through all of these reboots and IP, and when you have your own original piece, it's like the more you can stack the deck in your favor. For writers out there, it's like find a producing partner who has some juice, who can help you get to the front of the line, so to speak. I mean, like when you're at Warner Brothers, you're thinking, Greg Berlanti, great. We met with Sarah and Ryan, and then Greg loved the show. And it's like right there, you're going to be an important piece of development. If the development matches everything, then you're in a great position. And I think a lot of writers think, well, does that matter? Do I need all of that? But you do. You need to position yourself in a way you have to really think about it, especially if you're not on a deal, because you're coming in like we weren't on a deal, so we were just coming in. There was no sort of they could have said no in the first meeting, Warner Brothers, go figure out something else. I mean, they had no obligation to like what we had. Yeah. So not saying they have an obligation like we had.
But they do.
They usually don't.
They're listening.
But I think it's important for people to understand, like, you got to strategize and you got to sort of be both writer and producer when you're talking about going out, and you have to really think about who is the right partner for this idea. Like, do you partner with JJ on God Friended Me or on Alcatraz? Do you partner with Greg Berlanti on Alcatraz or God Friended Me? It's very, those shows specifically kind of need the right partner that makes sense to everybody as well.
Yeah, and it sounds like you guys did it right in that everybody understands what this show is.
Yeah, totally. No,
when does it premiere?
September 30th.
Great.
At 8:30 after the NFL. It's going to be 8:30 to 9:30 that night, and then October 7th we go back to our normal
8 p.m.
hour, 8 p.m. right after 60 Minutes.
Awesome. Folks should check it out. What do you want? You want to plug anything?
Yeah, Single Parents, September 26th.
Great.
I'm super excited. We're after Modern Family.
It's going to be good.
Yeah.
Let's wrap up by asking what you are watching on television these days. What's getting you excited or inspired? What are you talking about with your friends, your loved ones? Steven.
God, it's been the last 2 months. It's like hard to watch anything. But, I just, watched The Handmaid's Tale, and it's terrific. Season 2 is definitely even darker. And then you come to work and do God Friended Me. You're like, that's a nice relief for sure. But that's terrific. I'm excited for Game of Thrones to return, obviously, like everyone else, and excited for Veep, which is like one of my favorite shows, to come back.
Great. Bryan.
Yeah, I mean, Game of Thrones is obviously everything. Although I will be the first one to say the last 2 seasons, I feel like not as good. Everyone's a critic. I think The Crown is like, to me, the best thing ever.
Terrific.
And, I wish I could say there's a network show that I'm like super stoked about out there. But back in the day, I mean, just to plug network, because network doesn't get enough love. I think like Lost back in the day was a real, important turning point for me as a writer in network television.
I do watch This Is Us, though.
Oh yeah, This Is Us.
I watch This Is Us with my wife, and it's definitely like our favorite network show, and I think goes beyond network. I think what Dan Fogelman has managed to tap in is a lot of things that we're trying to do, which is get back to just like real emotion, and it's okay, to make people feel something, to cry, to laugh, versus just being so high concept.
Yeah, for sure.
Totally.
And I think network's doing comedy really well right now. And I think they're taking swings.
Good Place.
Absolutely.
So good.
Yeah.
That's what I'm a Good Place nerd. Insecure. I've been that second episode written by Amy Aniobi. My good friend was so good this season. And I was really into season 2 of Glow. Mm-hmm. Super excited they got the pickup for that 3rd season. I rolled over to my husband in bed recently, and I was this far away from his face, and I screamed, "I love shows about women!" And he...
Have you seen Marvelous Mrs. Maisel?
No, I haven't watched it. That's
God, it's amazing.
I hear it's so good.
It's so good. That is, I will say, that is like, it was terrific.
I have to plug Rick and Morty too. That is by far and away, I think, my favorite half hour of television that I could possibly watch right now. I just rewatch them over and over at night just to get my brain away from God Friended Me.
I mean, you got to do it. I almost never watch comedy like when I'm like murder all the time at my house when I'm working. But I'm doing a Happy Endings rewatch right now, and it's really delightful.
It is. The thing I loved about Happy Endings, and we just had a Happy Endings writer in here.
Who'd you have?
Listen.
Okay.
We're cutting that out.
Okay.
They just used every joke on that show. Like, they were like, what are the 6 jokes around this? Great. We're using all of them. The pace of it is so good.
I love it.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for listening to the Writers Panel. Tune in next Tuesday and every Tuesday for a brand new episode. And in the meantime, please subscribe and review the Writers Panel on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. And follow me on Twitter @BenBlacker, just like it sounds. And let me know who you want to have on the show. The Writers Panel is a co-production of the Forever Dog Podcast Network and the ATX Television Festival. You can listen to more Forever Dog podcasts at foreverdogpodcast.com and keep up with the ATX Fest throughout the year at atxfestival.com. Thank you, and see you next week. Well, you'll hear me next week. Thanks for subscribing.
Forever Dog.
This has been a Forever Dog production. Executive produced by Brett Boehm, Joe Cilio, and Alex Ramsey. For more original podcasts, please visit foreverdogpodcasts.com and subscribe to our shows on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Keep up with the latest Forever Dog news by following us on Twitter and Instagram @ForeverDogTeam and liking our page on Facebook.